The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pasture. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall continue to follow me all the days of this protracted experience of death, and I will dwell in the house of the most super intelligent, power, source, and force of love and creation forever. What's happening? Benton here. Rolling out the truck stop early, a couple of hours early. 9:30 a.m. appointment. Maybe they'll take me early at the delivery. I don't know. Remembering now that the interstate was closed just east of here yesterday. And failed to check to see is it open. So I guess we're about to find out. Looked like a wreck. There's a truck stop closer to the delivery, but the parking is so tight and fills up so early in the day, even the paid parking, that I don't even consider it to be an option anymore. I believe we have some, contractual regular customers in the area that maybe I could have parked at. I haven't bothered to figure that out. Yeah. Been dealing with the fallout of yesterday's second live stream. Been going through something in this dead flesh of mine that I'd like to talk about. If y'all would like to hear it, shout out to Replay Crew. Again, as we know, this is not a cope, although I guess it is, because so is everything else. But at what point will there be no audience? We seem to peak out around 10 listening concurrently live nearly daily. That's part of leaving early, in fact. It's part of it. Not wanting to disturb the truckers next to me with my loud voice. So all the better to drive and yap. So bear with me while we find our way to the interstate here, I-84 in New York State. About to be in Connecticut. Time for coffee. Got one can of cold brew left. All right. Woo-hoo. Life. The breakfast cereal. Mikey likes it. Protracted experience of death's simple pleasure. 28 degrees on the dash, 3/4 of a tank of fuel. Here we go. Yes, to expect the accepted with respect to spiritual attack. A change of pace is certainly a psychological weapon of the realm. And I realized part of the anger, there was some anger exhibited on yesterday's stream, number 2. So much so that after the stream, the royal we was, cognizant of the residue of that anger, and had to sort of talk myself down from that in a way, really just meaning, hey, what's this anger here? What's this mood? And a little bit of heavy heartedness, and that all comes we know that proper identification, because none of that's even possible. Right? So, state of perhaps heavy heartedness, anger, resentments, sure. But for that to then linger and remain, it's like, well, even to the morning to some extent. And, little sleep last night, not a lot of sleep. Some of that is probably the schedule and the changing, going from 90 degrees down in Laredo to now I believe the temperature is going to be dropping. So I don't think it's supposed to get much above, at least not in the area I'm leaving. I'm not sure about driving 2.5 hours to Connecticut, but I think we're looking at below freezing. Whatever that adjustment does to the body, and with time change, and then each shift, waking up and starting to drive earlier, because that's one of my favorite things to do if I'm loaded at the truck stop, if the trailer's loaded. Wake up refreshed, go through my morning routine, and then roll out. And of course, driving all day, but then, needing to make time in order to make a certain number of miles to make all of this work, to do what, right? And so number one is to, and this will tie into the spiritual attacks and the change of pace, right? And sort of, so first to sort of relax into the comfort of that, but it's not even comfort. So actually what we're looking at is temporarily the experience of the job lining up with the being's preference. We all have preferences, and they're really only important to each of us individually. That's how preference works, including myself. And so now the realm loves to reinforce a notion of, well, the being will be catered to. And Millennial Steam over on his channel seems to be going through, possibly, and this is my mere speculation, some strife around this when he speaks with other people, especially at work. And I believe he said he had recently had an entire week off. So, going back to work, to the, office environment, to be something of a minor celebrity in a way, to, people might be a little more, oh, well, what did you do? Talking about the break and the time off. And I'm, again, merely speculating. And hang on, let me slow down before I open too many cans of worms here. So put a pin in millennials theme for now. Although there are some important points to glean there to uh, change of pace or it's going to get buried. And so it's because of I allowed myself to sort of feel catered to. There you go. Even though I did not have those thoughts and sort of, well, of course. And then actually, now that I think about it, I got to watching this one trucker channel where this guy's covering a certain view of the news and trucking, or the idea that the government's cracking down on these, illegal drivers, and that's going to somehow resurrect the industry, which of course it's not. And so now I can see, actually, I was partially suffering a fantasy. Let me make sure I'm on the correct route. Yeah, I am. And so I'd fallen into this fantasy, and here's where the being lulled into a false sense of security comes in. When the reality is there is no security here, regardless of the emotions of the being. This realm is the lack of security. It cannot provide security. It doesn't, even if it wanted to, it wouldn't know how. And the realm would make a mockery out of providing security or resources or abundance, even if it had a pure intention. Now we're back to the Bible and Saul of Tarsus and Paul talking about that regardless of his intention, he ends up performing evil. That's what he said. And again, that's my paraphrase of his commentary. And that's more or less of this distillation of the gospel of Paul, as far as I can tell, meaning, it is in a way the closest that the realm itself perhaps will come to acknowledging that it cannot provide righteousness. It's lack of righteousness. So if there's ever going to be righteousness, and in the gospel of Paul, it's using Christ as a scapegoat, using Jesus as a scapegoat, and say, well, there was your righteous man. You've already had him. Meanwhile, look at the world. It's 100 years later or whatever by the time Saul came along, or however many. So in a way, again, mockery. Now he didn't say these things; it's implied. Well, you had perfect righteousness in the flesh. What more do you want? How'd that go? How'd that work out for you? Because the system understands, well, these bozos are not going to en masse bootstrap within themselves mind, body, and spirit. That's not going to happen. What's up? What's up, Folk Hungry? I see you down there. So back to the lulling into a false sense of security to begin to identify as, oh, well, I'm great. Benton is, he's sanctified as a trucker because he's got a clean record. And again, I wasn't even having these thoughts. It was a sentiment and a perception and a feeling. This wasn't even in my conscious mind, but this was going on energetically within me. Right. So as we're starting to see the enemy or an enemy, so this world of death and game of lies that makes an enemy of what I am, part of that is to have what I am is surrounded and encased and encrusted with this animated death warmed over flesh that comes along with it has its own ideas. And there's another content creator that uses the term beingness that I've recently started to use, who lectures on the nature of the mind to some extent. And it seems to me in this moment that this is partially what the mind is doing, right? The mind is overriding in a way and saying, well, Benton, you can have all these discourses you want and you can bootstrap internally mind, body, and spirit, but that's still mind is a part of the picture. And, how much attention and vigilance are you going to pay to the mind? Because the lulling into a false sense of security and the change of pace is, well, buddy, you got to have to rest at some point. You're going to have to, there's many means and machinations to have me sort of shut all of that off temporarily, right? So I guess it is the mind, body, and spirit is required. You got the logical thought process, you got the physical, seemingly physical, sensations in the body, and then also the spirit, and with, again, partially including the emotions, perhaps, and the overlap, of all three. And as I had noted first thing yesterday morning, I said, man, I'm hurt. I got way more aches and pains in my physicality, my upper back, my thoracic spine, and I knew it meant something. What is this though? I didn't know what it was. Now I know. And that's, the biblical concept of like this vigilant watchfulness, the idea of keeping watch, almost in a military sense. And again, I know I'm jumping around a lot and introducing a lot of topics. And again, this is the advanced course. This is for the practitioner. And because that's who's listening, because ultimately when it goes to 0 on the screen and it never goes beyond 0, well, there's always at least one listener, which is Benton, and there's always one practitioner. So when there's 10 listening plus Benton, which would make 11, well, there still might only be one advanced course high level practitioner, and that's okay. That's enough. See, that's the answer. That's the counterpoint to Saul's, where you've already had a righteous man in the flesh. How'd that work out? It's like, well, here's another one. Oh, really? You're claiming righteousness? You damn right I am. I am that one. When properly identified, there is no possibility of anything but righteousness, and that would have been Christ's superpower, in my view. That would have been Christ's secret. You think Christ wouldn't have known that? You think Christ wouldn't have had to be encrusted and ensnared and encircled by the dead flesh and its desires? Would not Christ have had to know, more or less from day one, what he was contending with? To understand watchfulness, vigilant watchfulness would be required. And then to perhaps lapse into improper identification with this world momentarily, but for that not to be sin, because maybe when not acted upon. Again, this is mere speculation. But it sounds like cope. I don't care how it sounds. Who cares how it sounds? That looks like a prison. Is that New York State prison over there? One of them. I think I say that every time I come through here. A little stopped up this morning, sleeping. If I don't open the little side windows at night, I get a little stopped up when I run the heat. I woke up and closed it at a certain point. It was too hot to run the heater. I guess I should have, even with the windows open. So that's why I woke up too cold and closed. Either way, this is part of the living in a truck. It's just sometimes you can't get sometimes it's just not possible to get the climate adjusted in the truck to get proper sleep. It's just not possible. So to master the ability to rest at a minimum is important. Seemingly. Well, they're following slow trucks back there. Yeah, they are. I'm starting to care less and less about that. The following, and yeah, because I find it humorous more and more. Just watching what these people do, following slow trucks. So I want to cover. Let's make a checklist. I want to cover millennial steam. I want to cover change of pace, which I believe I'm covering right now, and I want to cover, what was the other thing? Oh yes, the what may very well comprise today's spiritual attacks, and then fear already lapsing into fear a little bit. I'd like to talk about, which again, that's a violation. That's not allowed. Nor is repression. Can't repress it. Well, I could. That would be an error, as repression is always harmful to the individual. And then, so to back up to yesterday's stream, second stream, I know once I start talking politics, that's a bad sign. So the improper identification of yesterday was to talk politics, but in the moment, not to recognize, hey, buddy, you're talking politics. It's got to be a bad sign. And, either knock it off or at least understand what you're doing in this moment. And maybe knock it off. Maybe reconsider knocking it off. And then also recognizing that probably part of waking up feeling a little more sore than normal in the tissues, well, that's probably to tap further in to that deeply buried resentments and low-level stagnated energies. The years and years and years ago, many probably going back to childhood, and part of the puzzle is this morning, sitting cross-legged on my bunk back there, going through my, and again, I'd like to come up with a better term than prayer. I need to hit the dictionary and find something, but I don't like that prayer is so close to, P-R-A-Y and P-R-E-Y. Like phonetically, it's too close. And, with the actual spelling. But saying what would be, and if people want to talk about so-called spell casting and words as spells, I mean, really, that's what that is in a way, right? Is that a necromancy? If the enemy is dead, if the, more correctly, if this world of death and game of lies that makes an enemy of what I am, if that, that dead flesh encircling me, is that necromancy? I don't know. Now I need to look up the meaning of the word necromancy. So this morning, and typically I'll do a little bit of, it's yoga, but it's my own invented versions of yoga. It's part of how I assess the healing and restoration, in those tissues, which of course ties in with the emotional systems and energetically and spiritually as well. And I recognized, I said, oh, okay, that's what this anger was. It was, in order to heal and restore and clear and release those energies, the associated emotions must be experienced. So I could feel based on, how deeply my awareness was able to penetrate into those areas and just how painful it was, because of course the most painful, difficult to release energies, that's what ends up being left for last. right? The easiest to release, that's what goes first. So that was years and years and years ago now. So for there still to be stagnated energies to be cleared and released, well, that has to be the most challenging forms. And then simultaneously, it's a progression of the practitioner, me in this case. It's the increase over time via the so-called advanced course of the being's ability to cope with all of that and to address it, which now brings us to what went on yesterday. So now the being has come full circle, seemingly. At least in that regard, if that makes any sense. So again, what I am is victory and will never know defeat. See? So in the change of pace and the lulling into a false sense of security, and the lull can only occur through what? Benton's own temporary false identification. And what do you mean by false identification? It's to temporarily fail to reconcile or resolve or solve for waking dreams, surrealistic, unreality, deja vu all over again, because when recognizing the surreal and absurd with respect to the unreality surrealistically and the waking dream of daily life, so-called life, air quotes, so-called life, then it's not possible to falsely identify, because what I am can't take that seriously. That's not possible. That would be to exhibit poor judgment. Judgment meaning to form an opinion on. And then that would also be a lack of proper discernment. What I am is discernment. It doesn't know how not to discern. Now that seems to run counter to the Jack and the Beanstalk example. So no, Jack was unable to, he left to his own devices, had no concept of what could occur, what could go wrong within delusion. That's a different thing. It's like, are you experienced? Jack wasn't. Benton is, Stockholm syndrome, the proverbial, ran through by the system. And that's, forever young Generation X doesn't want to face the reality that, I'll speak for myself and just pretend like everybody else is Gen X, which is also a boomer from the perspective of the young folks. But 50 is old, busted, and ran through. Now, I understand the culture and advertising and marketing and society, which is all garbage. Yeah, garbage promotes the idea that, forever young and 50 is the new whatever and 70 is the new, all of that bullshit. It's all a lie. You can't have youth as the most prized possession, right? Actual youth can't be exalted above all, but then we give it to everybody. That doesn't work. Sorry, 50-year-olds, you're old and busted, whether you like it or not. Who cares? It is what it is. Deal with it or don't, as you see fit, right? And who suffers if you, the listener, don't deal with it? Well, you suffer the most. I mean, other people might suffer a small amount. This is what I mean by, effectively no power or meaning is possible outside of the individual. Oh, shit. We done fucked up now. All right. Well, thank you. There's a considerate trucker. Thanks, Bubba. That's what I would have done. It's a straight truck driver. Well, we are in the Northeast, so you have actual truck drivers driving some of these straight trucks, especially this close to New York. Anyway, well done, sir. One moment while we take the taurine so we can drink our second egg yolk drink. Bear with me. We've got bad drivers all around us. We're on a hill climb. Bear with me. Every year on these big rigs, they make the gearing slightly worse for the driver than the year before. I know there were some trucks of the past that would have dropped a gear way earlier than this. Some bozo four-wheeler. You're going to have to keep your head on a swivel there, Bubba. I can't jump over a lane for you when I'm going 40 with the flashers on up a big-ass hill. Of course, they had plenty of space to hammer down on the fuel pedal and get in front of me, but that would require them to not be looking at their phone and to actually be paying attention to the road. You know, that's not going to happen. All right, hill climb's almost over. Glad I left early. There's already traffic. What's 5:30? Of course there is. Silly boy. All right, well, let's see if I have any notion of where I was. Well, I'll just have to assume that I made it far enough that folks would understand what I was talking about. Yeah, now somebody says they can barely hear me. Huh. That's probably on your end, most likely. Generally, number one, I'm loud as fuck. Number two, these mics are pretty good on these earbuds. So I'll double check real quick and make sure I'm on the proper mics. But yeah, that's most likely on your end, person that can barely hear me. Especially if you're trying to listen, depending on how you're trying to listen. And so back to being lulled into a false sense of security. And then here's where the change of pace temporarily bears fruit. Then I became aware this morning of a fear state with a little bit of dread. And then I started having ideas of, because the 24/7 analysis going on in my brain was at some point became aware of, based on the amount of hours on my clock. And then the dispatcher who came into work yesterday morning, right? And this is where a truck driver, what I do as my job, it doesn't mesh well with what the dispatcher does, because yesterday there was absolutely nothing for the dispatch. He didn't even have to think about me yesterday. So he comes into work Monday morning. He's off for the long holiday weekend, right? So he did just enough work on Friday or whatever day it was, to get me loaded and get me through the weekend, which got me all the way through Monday. So he came in yesterday morning, and then he's got to plan out whatever drivers. And again, we're going to have, some of them are going to be going back to work. See, so so he's came in yesterday morning, and unless he worked over the weekend, and even if he did, it's not like these brokers are working over the weekend unless they have to. So it's okay, show up Monday morning, and now it's the mad dash of chase our tails, put out fires, get everything dispatched and assigned, right? And anything that can be ignored or put on the back burner is ignored or put on the back burner. So that would have been Benton here. So perhaps they could have, and maybe they did. See, here's the thing is, they could have already planned what I'm doing next, and just, they don't tell me, have you talked to the criminal? And I don't mean me, but gust of wind blew some snow off the top of that flatbedder's load. Quickened the old heart rate momentarily. If that had been a big piece of ice, that could have went right through the windshield, right? Perhaps. And so it was the dread of recognizing that, okay, today he's going to come in first thing in the morning. I'll be getting, with the time change, I'll be getting unloaded about the time he shows up. And I've worked office jobs, I've worked cubicle jobs. I know what it's like first thing in the morning. I understand that people are trying to live their lives in their off hours, and that, it takes, now some people are just morning folks and they're raring to go, and maybe this guy is that to some extent, but, a lot of people show up to work and they don't even really know what's going on for the first hour or two. And that's kind of borne out in that movie Office Space, where he's talking about where, Peter, the main character, is just, they ask him, what do you do here? And, could you go through your day? And he's talking about, he just comes in the morning, he just kind of spaces out for like an hour or whatever. That's a lot of folks, right? And so that today I will then be, we got to get Benton planned and assigned. And, in that spacing out and the trying to boot up and come online and be productive and chase one's tail, what happens is, like what they tried to do to me right before Christmas, where they just try to, let's just go on the load board and find him some scraps real quick. And we'll text, we'll, and they're probably all on WhatsApp, whatever. We'll WhatsApp message, some of our trusted brokers in the Northeast. We'll put our feelers out real quick. And the first thing that fits his clock that looks like he's got the hours to do it, we'll just throw that at him. And that's going to be one of these bullshit, exhausting, straight through loads, where you pretty much, to do it legally, you have to basically be on a full reset of the hours, not the 17, not the 70, but the 11 and the 14 to make the appointment, right? To actually make the delivery. So you would have to be on the premises with a full clock, get loaded, and then leave immediately and drive straight through, right? Well, if I get there at noon and they load me by 2, right? So now you're telling me I got to drive till midnight to make this happen and work off the clock and work during my 10-hour break, meaning, oh, now we're into the personal conveyance. Maybe we're doing split sleeper, right? And what causes that? That's caused by the dispatcher and his working conditions, and he's always going to suit himself over what are my needs. See? And that's called human nature. And then if I bring it up, and then what are the psychological and what is the manipulation and warfare aspects? So I could try to manage the process, and I could have been talking to him yesterday, like, hey man, what are we doing tomorrow? What do you mean, what are we doing tomorrow? Right. Well, we'll just talk to Benton, who's trying to communicate. So the gaslighting is, proper communication, very important. That's the most important thing, communication. And it's like, well, what do you mean? What are we doing tomorrow? It's like, well, wait a minute. Am I supposed to communicate with you, or am I not supposed to communicate with you? So, and then we get into the neurodivergence and the undiagnosed fake autism, which is like, well, wait a minute. What do you mean? What do I mean? I was told that communication is key. Oh, well, that was gaslighting. Now, they're not free to say that, but, oh, well, that's gaslighting. We don't mean that. We don't mean that it's key. All right. That's lip service. And so it's the fear and the dread around the likelihood of being assigned one of these loads. Meanwhile, the preference would be, well, I'd rather just take a 34. And I've worked enough days. I think we're probably into the 3rd week now with no restart. Not that I have to have a restart, but maybe at some point. Speed limit dropping. No wonder we're slowing down. And I don't know why things are falling from the sky. The shelf above me. I don't know what's happened up there. Multiple items are now falling. What is that going up there to fall? Doesn't make any sense. And so now it's the recognition of, the mistake was to get lulled, to allow myself to identify with when things have gone more towards my preference. Number one is that's not representative of good fortune. Number one. Number two, how does that preference even serve me? Right? Is it even appropriate to enjoy that at the level of preference? Is that even appropriate? Because to enjoy that at the level of preference, how is that to expect the already accepted spiritual attack? So the easy part for Benton at this point is to accept the spiritual attack that's about to occur. And then if it doesn't occur, that's still a spiritual attack, because that is the change of pace. So in these moments, it was the failure to expect ended up functioning as spiritual attack. So to not understand that in the moment is to let down one's guard or to not be properly vigilant. See? Whereas I would say that to expect the accepted would be to understand, well, yeah, you might prefer the way you've been assigned for almost a week now, but what's that got to do with anything? That's happenstance. That's just the way it happened, sir. That's not, number one, you did nothing to make that happen or earn that, because you can't, there's nothing I can do. Because remember, I'm the person who had to, wrestle with the dispatcher when I said, "Hey man, what are we doing for Christmas?" And they said, "What do you mean, what are we doing for Christmas?" And then he's like, "Well, I assume we're working or we're rolling." I'm like, "Well, I assume I'm working. I don't know what you're doing. I'm figuring you're probably hanging out with your family, right?" And so this shows you also the pronoun. It's like, well, you know, if it's a team, but I'm the only one in the truck out here driving around the country, or at least the eastern half of it, right? And he's going home every night. See how it works? And then the circumstances of my activities living in a truck and picking up and delivering loads is largely determined, once we get out of the confines of my clock and, what's available in the area. The number one factor ends up being, when does his butt hit the seat in the office? And when does he stand up from his desk and get in his car and go home? See, that becomes the number one determining factor. And then in combination with whatever else does he have going on, and whatever his emotional state may or may not be, right? So that is a spiritual attack, So with that knowledge and understanding, it's like, okay, is that even good fortune that things seemingly worked out in my favor? Because it still led to me not sleeping very well, just because of the changing nature of the schedule, right? It's not like it was just great across the board. There was a hustle necessary. The only way to avoid the hustle of the last 3 days would have been to, after getting loaded at 7 p.m. or whatever, would have been to drive, out of Laredo and, drive like 5 hours or whatever. And all that really does is, okay, I don't have to drive as many miles every day, but then that still extends what time can I start every day. Then that makes it more difficult to park at truck stops because of now we're shutting down later in the day. So as we see, even when it seems like it's, everything going great, no, it's just less bad. It's less bad than it otherwise would have been. So what? It doesn't mean anything. It has no meaning, right? See, wisdom is to understand that I need to wear my windbreaker jacket while I'm drinking my egg drink, because at some point I'm going to spill it all over myself, as I just did. And then if I just had my hoodie on, my clean laundered hoodie, then it would have egg yolk drink all over it right about now. See, that's wisdom. It's to know how to deal with one's own folly, folly of the dead flesh. And so remember, the bootstrappers and the suck it up buttercup crowd and the constant bright siders of everything, right? The ones who will bright side no matter what happens, right? The ignoring reality is not positivity crowd, meaning the ones that put a positive spin on everything through repression. That they will just bright side everything I just said. And now what that is that's the attack of, well, let's just gaslight Benton into internalizing all of that so he'll shut the fuck up and go back to his suffering. It's like, well, the suffering is there no matter what, via attachment, by the way. But then, the job is suffering. The job is a performance of suffering. And so here's what made the fear and the dread go away. was to accept and to correct the improper identification and to realize that, number one, the last week or so hasn't been that great. Number two, I do tend to go through something emotionally every Christmas. And so this year hasn't been nearly as challenging for me personally as in the past, but this is probably some of that also, some of yesterday's, and it was limited, but there was certainly some anger yesterday, right? And to understand and resolve it and to deal with it appropriately, and also to recognize that some of that anger and its expression is appropriate because that is the healing and the restoration. And to pray and to request, ask and ye shall receive style, literal healing and restoration. Well, here, careful what you wish for. Here it is, buddy. Next thing you know, Benton's on live stream and now he's talking politics and getting angry. Well, it's like, okay, buddy, guess what? That is the healing. And that's what you asked for, sir. Now you don't have to, Benton doesn't have to talk about politics, right, in order to do that. Is this a lane or not? I can't really tell. And so the John chapter 14, verse 26, the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, teaching all things and bringing unto my remembrance. That's what that is. That's the mechanism that leads to the resolution of all of this within the dead flesh, within this world of death and game of life, within the context of vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transaction. Accounting for waking dreams, surrealistic, unreality, deja vu all over again. See? And then also the confess, repent, seek forgiveness, and forgiven like it never happened framework as a technology to, further assert, repentance at the level of, that's the error, is to temporarily identify with the realm itself. That's the sin. That's the error, right? So the idea of Christ dying for sin, that's not possible. That's blasphemy in the Holy Spirit. To say Christ died for our so-called sins, right? Air quotes, our sins. To even say that is blasphemy in the Holy Spirit. That's, number one, not possible. Number two, not appropriate. Because symbolically, that would then affirm one's belief that death is of a high enough value and contains enough power and meaning that it could equal out to what Christ represents at the level of what I am is the way, what I am is the truth, what I am is the life. Well, how can that be the symbolic sacrifice that brings back so-called humanity from the so-called sins of the dead flesh? That is blasphemy, folks. And that is the ultimate form of treating blessing as if it were a curse. And it's one of the number one tenets of Christianity. And when I talk about all religion is man-made and demonic, that's what I mean. And I just proved it with logic and reason. Now, people can try to wiggle their way out and try to debate what I'm saying. That's fine, but they're wrong. They are wrong. Now, in inverted world, what sort of, here's my version of common sense, what sort of insane person would accept on some level what this realm is telling them and just accept it? And well, it must be true. Oh, you mean the lying, evil, fallen, wicked world of death and game of lies is what taught you all of this stuff about Christ, and therefore it has to be correct? Are you crazy? Oh, well, but it was divine. Some divinely inspired human beings wrote it in a book. Well, where's the proof of that they were divinely inspired? Meanwhile, the book itself says that their intentions couldn't have been, that even if they have a proper intention, they're still serving evil. That's in the book. Now, it doesn't say that they specifically, the supposed ones who were divinely inspired, but when Paul wrote much of the New Testament, isn't it under the auspices that he's divinely inspired? And he himself says, well, hey, that in his own observance of his own performance, he said, well, hey, regardless of the purity of my intention, he ends up serving evil anyway. That's what he said, or a paraphrase of what he said. And see, there's no wiggling out of that, Christian. And so when Chalk Body Outline, shout out to Drew World Order, wants to say, hey, don't listen to anybody, at least Charlie Kirk would mention Jesus, and yeah, don't trust anybody who won't mention Jesus. And then I guess he thought of me and said, well, and furthermore, don't trust anybody who doesn't accept Paul. So Chalk Body Outline saying if you're gonna be a Christian like he understands Christianity, one has to accept what Paul is asserting around. Well, hey, it doesn't matter how pure your intention is. You're gonna serve evil anyway. So if it's make the tree good or make the tree rotten, the tree by the fruit, every knee shall bow. If we take Paul at his word, there is no good tree. There is no good fruit. There is no bending the knee to the spirit of what I am. That can't occur. See? So now we see Christianity as another tool of the enemy, or more correctly, this world of death and game of lies that makes an enemy of what I am. See? And so I'm watching Kino Casino this morning, and they're making fun of Wings of Redemption, this locale, and he's, bah humbug about Christmas. They're making fun of him because that's what they do, and it's entertaining. But then I'm listening to all of this, and I'm thinking they're talking about what Christmas is supposed to mean, and I'm thinking, yeah, PPP, the fat guy on Kino Casino, he preaches every once in a while, if only at the level of satire, and he'll talk about Jesus. And I'm listening to him go through the whole Christmas spiel, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I thought Jesus Christ was the reason for the season. Now, of course, it's not, but. And then finally, almost as a throwaway, it's like he remembered, oh, wait a minute, I forgot the Jesus part. So he sort of throws that in at the end. And that's partially what inspired what you just heard on this live stream. Because I posted that on, not on his channel. I posted it actually, I think over at maybe Sam Hyde's comments. There's always somebody wanting to talk about Jesus over there. Or maybe, I don't know where it was. I posted it somewhere. Some version of what I just said on here. Apologies for the lapse in discourse. The driving's been quite challenging already this morning, so a lot of focus and attention is uh, required here. And one of the drawbacks of driving at night is I can't see the hills, so I don't know when. I can't plan for the upcoming hills, so I get stuck dragging myself up a lot of these hills and don't know that that's about what's about to happen. I don't know what's happening till it's happening. If that makes sense. I don't. No advance warning. And part of and at this point, I've actually taken my email address out of the description of these videos because I went for a long time and nobody emailed me, and I was sort of, thought that was kind of strange. And then I started getting some emails, and then wasn't even really able to read them in their entirety because it's like, well, I've got my own insanity of my own protracted experience of death. So to take in the details of somebody else's, the insanity of their protracted experience of death, and then took in enough details to, some of that got woven into yesterday's somewhat angry rant, right? And if that person hears it and gets something out of it, all the better. But part of what YouTube initially was supposed to be was like, let's say I make a video, then somebody else makes sort of a response video, and then I can go listen to their response video, and then we can have sort of a over time like a collaboration. So and this is not a challenge to the audience. It's a why am I the only one here talking into a microphone, broadcasting it or recording it? And so let's not forget, whoever's listening to me right now, if I had not recorded my voice doing a rant about the mask early on in the pandemic and emailed it to Drew over at Chalk Body Outline, that's how this whole channel started. Eventually, and it took a while, but this is how it eventually came to be. And again, I'm not expecting that or requesting it. I'm saying, if people have their own thoughts and their own ideas, some people, the best way for them to express that is possibly typing it out, even if they don't ever do anything with it. Some people would organize it in their mind, although I would say, I don't see a lot of evidence of people progressing their own, thoughts and logic. I don't see, now I see some people doing it, but I don't see it. In my opinion, it should happen a lot more universally, or more often, that people are observably, evolving their own ways of approaching, the protracted experience of death, all of these various matters. And so part of the fear and the dread around the job is, the number one thing that happens as a result of these, two things happen as a result of this dispatchers and the life they're living is At certain points, they do what's most convenient for them, which is to just as quickly as possible find me just a throwaway scrap leftover load, and here you go, Ben. Toss me a bone. When I would prefer, well, how about you take your time, and if necessary, we'll wait for tomorrow. Well, the boss won't tolerate that. The boss runs around fussing and chewing people out and injecting fear around that. Well, we got to maximize these drivers' clocks every day. Well, Benton's thing is, hey, man, you got fucking 14 hours. Whatever you get in that 14 hours, and yeah, occasionally I'll work beyond 14 hours, but if y'all fuck up and start and I'm starting my clock later in the day, and you think I'm going to drive till midnight or 1 a.m., I've done about as much of that as I'm going to do. So, yeah, I'll be flexible here and there, but the problem is if I do it one time, then it happens again the next day. Then it happens again the next day. And then it happens again. So it's not, if I could just do it one time in a vacuum, and then if the dispatcher had a means to understand, we got him out of what his sweet spot, and now he's sacrificed by taking on this thing that fucks him up, and he's willing to do that, but the next day we have to fix it. Well, what happens the next day is they repeat the exact same process that caused the problem in the first place. And I've said this before, I'll say it again, the driver is left to resolve all faulty and issues. It just gets pushed off onto the driver. It's like, yeah, man, by that third night in a row of driving all night, now I'm quitting again for the third time. So can we just avoid the part where I quit for the third time? Because eventually y'all are going to let me quit, but at least for the time being, we're not there yet. I mean, am I going to have to start calling y'all motherfuckers? Motherfuckers? What's it going to take? If Falcon claims they fired me, I claim that I quit, but it's like, really the answer to that is, when I'm trying to when I'm applying for truck driving jobs, it's like, look, they don't let you quit in truck driving. I'm sure I tried to quit several times and they talked me out of it. It's like, eventually, when they finally am done with me enough to let me quit, yeah, of course they think they fired me after talking me out of quitting 5 different times over 9 months. Like, what are we? I'm not even like, what did I do to get fired? Now, on that job, I actually arguably did something to get fired, which is I sort of drove back empty from Utah to Dallas, but actually I didn't because they had me pick up a brand new refrigerated trailer for a different company, and they would have at least gotten enough money out of that deal to pay for the fuel coming back from Utah. And then my thing is, well, if y'all are mad enough about it, I guess just don't pay me. You don't have to give me my cents per mile, but because at that point I was quitting anyway. It's like, yeah, why do you think I'm coming back empty? Because I'm done with y'all. Unless they talk me out of quitting again, see? And that was the straw that broke the camel's back, fine. But it's not the old model of, the worker is desperately clinging to the job and trying not to get laid off or fired. This was, no, I'm disgruntled because of my poor working conditions, and I've had all I can stand. I can't stand no more. See, and I don't give a fuck. But then it's put off onto the driver. Well, the driver did something wrong. No, I didn't. It's just, the company would have maybe made some money if I had, because they wanted me to go get the, get a dry van loaded into the reefer and then bring that back. See, they wanted to double dip, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. Except they sent me to pick up a load because they know I prefer to get loaded early in the morning if possible. And I was supposed to pick up an already loaded reefer trailer and drop my empty reefer trailer at a warehouse, except I got there and the pickup number they gave me, well, I go to the window and they're like, oh yeah, somebody already picked that load up. So the company then says, oh, well, yeah, you should have just called us and we've got, 10 different numbers to choose from. Like, okay, why didn't y'all tell me that? Why didn't you just give me the 10 different numbers to choose from? And why would I call and wake somebody up at midnight? And my experience is whoever I wake up at midnight or 2 a.m. my time doesn't know what the fuck's going on anyway. So why would I have any expectation that they could just pull some magical alternate pickup number out of their ass? Like, why would I have a notion of that? It doesn't even make sense. But they can't ever see it from my viewpoint because, well, we have multiple loads at that warehouse. How do I know that? How can I possibly know that? I can't. No way to know it. All I know is I call somebody at 2 a.m. who has no fucking idea what I'm talking about. And I just woke them up. So if they can't help me and they don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, why would I bother to wake them up? Call it. That's the so-called human side, which is not even human. I guess the actual human side would be, yeah, just wake them up anyway. That's their job. Well, yeah, it's their job to help me as well. And so this is the spiritual attack. So the dread and the fear going into today is resolved by recognizing, hey, buddy, much like Christ, the idea of, taking on the so-called sin of the world is in actuality, it's to expect what you've already accepted at the level of persecution and spiritual attack. It's to understand, to expect all of this to be the case, to expect that they're going to assign me some kind of bullshit straight through load. And then understand, well, when I tell them, hey, I'm happy to do this, but I hope y'all understand there's no way it's going to be on time. Well, why not? Well, because I'm not driving all night. That's why not. What do you mean you're not driving all night? Well, we have to do this and we have to do that. And like I told the second dispatcher who, either I don't know if he's even with the company. They told me he's no longer with the company. I have no idea. But like I told him, I said, well, unless you're going to get in the truck and drive it, this ain't getting there because I'm not doing that. Right. And so back to being lulled into a false sense of security by watching all these videos about the cleaning up of the industry. Well, if I am a licensed driver with citizenship and my value has now gone up because the government may very well be temporarily cleaning up the industry. And a lot of folks are now, that becomes sort of the panacea to fix everything when it's not going to be a panacea to fix everything. But that's, people believe that, right? So it sort of becomes the same thing. Now, temporarily, Benton feels some type of way because it's like, okay, now in my mind, my value to the company has risen, which means they're going to treat me better. And it's like, well, no, they're not. They're not going to treat you better, sir. And the fact that you managed to communicate to the dispatcher to not, because they tried to screw me over Christmas. They attempted to screw me over. And I managed to, socially engineer them away from that. And maybe some of that had to do with, hey, this guy is willing to put up with, the drawbacks of this job, and, he's in the truck, and we've got a truck payment, and, somebody's got to drive this thing, and might as well be this bozo, and, he's got a clean record, and on and on and on. That, remember, in this world of death and game of lies, that makes an enemy of what I am. Benton will only ever be treated like he's guilty unless they need to kiss my ass and lie and gaslight and treat me like I have a value to them. When the reality is, because of vacuous, delusory, adversarial, predatory business transacting, what the company is doing is extracting what they're able to extract out of me. And they're extracting in a render unto Caesar, let the dead bury the dead way. They're extracting whatever profit, so-called, that they're able to out of the industry through the so-called markets, right? And the rates and whatever contracts they have. And so if they have a contract with a few different companies in Connecticut, well, one of their trucks at some point has to go to Connecticut to pick up a load, or if not Connecticut, if it delivers in Connecticut, well, now maybe it's got to go pick up a load in Maryland or something where there's another customer. See how it works? I think you do. Again, now we see through a glass darkly. Wow, this guy's all over the road here. Better pass this bozo. Not going to be able to. See, it's dropping to 50. And I got a move that most truck drivers don't. Slam on the brakes, abort the pass, and get behind this guy. A lot of people get tickets this way because it's 65. They're rolling 68 and it dropped to 50. Because I guess we're probably coming into a city, I'm guessing. But nope, slam on the brakes, mission aborted, jump in behind it. Now we're on the hill climb. Now the trucker behind me is probably thinking, what the fuck's this bozo doing? And I'm like, I'm keeping my record clean, sir. Did you see that 50? I can't go fucking 71 and a 50. And oh, look, Johnny Law. Oops. Good luck with that. Now, 58, maybe I can explain that. 57, 58, 59. Well, we'll at least have a leg to stand on. We'll get pulled over. We'll have a shot. 71 to 50, that's like career over. Effectively. The precariousness of living in a truck. And one thing I'm realizing about this brand new truck is, I think whoever I work for, it's better for me to have a brand new truck, mainly because it doesn't guarantee it, but it at least reduces the likelihood that I'll have to try to put the thing in the shop during my 10-hour break. Remember, that's when, the company, unless there's just a breakdown and then nobody can do anything about that. It's like, oh, the mud flap got tore off. Well, just take it to the TA. Oh, you mean at the end of my shift? Because there's no time to stop en route. And I'll do that on my time. Oh, okay. When I'm supposed to be resting in the truck and the TA won't let me be in the truck while they're working on it. Okay, yeah, great plan. But then they all work in offices and I can tell them that till I'm blue in the face and to no effect. because they can't assign any of that a meaning because they don't experience that. Therefore, it does not exist because they don't experience it. It literally doesn't exist in their world. Like, literally. Yeah, I'm definitely glad I left early. This would have been miserable if I'd waited a couple more hours trying to drive through here. I rinse my mouth out real quick, clean up my teeth. And so, whatever feelings of annoyance or irritation get connected to everything I'm telling you is it's the processing of that. And so the acceptance is to not be irritated, but then simultaneously, whatever has been repressed in the now distant past that is being healed and restored and cleared and released. Now there's a mechanism for it to be cleared, resolved, healed, restored, and released. The restoration of the tissues, which is the restoration, is to release them from the bondage of the psychic attacks of this world, so-called trauma. See? And that's all the trauma talk is. That's a recognition of the fact that the predatory world of death and game of lies, it psychically attacks individuals just at a base default level. Right? Well, of course it does. And so to accept that is one thing, to expect it in a way of vigilant watchfulness is quite another. Now the corporate hellscape, McDonald's, Cadillac dealership, Starbucks. Here they come slow merging. The Jetsons. Here's George Jetson. They did okay. Cedric the Entertainer at Foxwood Casino. About another hour of driving, looks like. What's up, Leslie? Good to see you. So I believe I've gone through all of that material. Again, the advanced course, so the lessons are there. It's for the listener or the individual to discern and to uncover and to take what's there for them, their own purposes, and leave the rest, or not. Some are merely listening to the sound of my voice, and that's okay. So I'd like to transition to the millennial steam side of things. Apparently millennial steam is still foolish enough, and this is my opinion, is still foolish enough to try to have certain types of conversations with even perhaps his coworkers, and especially his not exclusively, but his female coworkers as well. I guess more, both male and female, I should say. Yep, slow roll me, slow merge me. Keep on slowing down. Slow down some more. Slow down some more. Slow down some more. Slow down some more. That's the solution. That's the answer to merging onto the interstate. Slow it down. Oh, now I hit the brakes. Slow it down. 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 Yeah, guess what? I can slow down too. What do you do now that I'm slowing down? You got a solution to that, little car? No, you do not. Now we're making traffic. We're going to back up, and there's no reason to have a backup. Of course, traffic's coming up so fast behind me. They're not paying attention. But we managed to get over to avoid the senseless backup that's occurring. I started noticing this in Dallas, where if the traffic was lighter than normal, people are just used to there being backups in certain areas. They'll just back up anyway in that area. But there's not enough volume of traffic to justify the slowdown and the stacking up traffic. They just do it anyway. That's what they're used to have. They're just used to there being a backup there, more or less that time of day. So that's what they do. Like, oh, okay, we're going to have a backup for no reason. Great. Love that. Now here's the TA I could have maybe gotten to yesterday. Well, if I would have used the PC, but it's effectively impossible to find parking without. So tight, it's pretty much basically impossible. Otherwise, everything I've driven today, I probably would have done yesterday, which meant then I would be close enough to the delivery to not start my clock, and then I'd just be like, all right, man, how about we just do a restart? Find me a load for tomorrow. That's off the table now. That's okay. Does it even matter? I've spent over an hour today explaining why it doesn't fucking matter. So, in some ways, it is the surrender, the spiritual surrender to, hey, world of death, game of lies, here I am, just in surrendering to the reality that it is going to do whatever it chooses to do with me one way or the other. And I have almost no say in that. It's just what it is. except, further torture and struggle can occur as a result, depending on how I react to that. It's my job to manage all of this. Meanwhile, again, in a world, what we're told is a world of abundance, it should be possible for me to serve some kind of function somewhere to be able to have just enough resources to live in a shack on somebody's property and to be able to feed myself without having to resort to truck driving, so that I can live in a truck and, have access to the funds to do what I need to do. See? So that now we can see that it is artificial, but a lot of what's going on here, or seems to be going on in this place at this time, is artificial. And so, in some way, there's realistically, at some point, does Benton want to continue to struggle and fight against the company in certain ways? And, I'm going to do Benton's going to do what Benton's going to do, and the company's going to do what the company does. And the business, the adversarial business transacting, is to be in a constant ongoing negotiations between myself and the company, whereby they're always seeking to extract the maximum out of me. And in doing that, they will cross over into transgressing and encroaching. And now it's my job to negotiate things in my favor, but it's not even my favor. It's just to maneuver just enough to sort of keep them up off of me. Right. So what I am, or not what I am, but so in performing this, Benton is being preyed upon, fed upon, extracted from in a parasitical fashion. Right. And so now we get into, am I supposed to just accept all of that? Right. Am I supposed to accept all of that? Or, and then I'm free to accept that, and I have, and now there's a certain amount of money where, at this point, do I want to take an entire week's pay, more or less, and just walk away from this motherfucker, which I don't really want to do, but, either way, just the hassles of moving out of the logistical hassles of moving out of the truck, into a motel or whatever. And then, that's mostly to be able to keep my belongings that I can't even keep unless I buy a car, because I have to have somewhere to put all of this stuff, and I have to have a way to carry it around. And at a certain point, based on this, when I talk about spiritual warrior genius and all of this, at what point does it actually become easier to just let it all alone? Meaning just divorce myself from all of it, right? And then to use the money to temporarily, like, to transition from all of this clothing and possessions, and all of the little knickknacks and paddywhacks involved in being able to make these hot drinks in the morning and get this certain type of nutrition and certain type of form, and all of these little tinctures. And yeah, I mean, sure, it helps, but it also helps me to put off something that I know is going to happen at some point, which is some actual fasting, not intermittent fasting. I do that anyway. Actual fasting that's going to happen at some point. But it's unlikely to occur while I'm driving a truck. I mean, why would I? Got three big bowls of fruit ready to go right here. And it's also to recognize, it's not in a cowardly way, but it's to recognize a lot of what I'm choosing to put up with is tied up in the conveniences around being able to live in the truck and to, again, have access to certain items and to be able to, and really for me, the number one concern is, can I get proper sleep and rest every night? And that's the number one drawback of actual street level homelessness that, of course, I have a lot of experience with, is the difficulties in accessing proper sleep and rest. And in fact, a big part of me traveling the country for so many years and going place to place was it's way easier to pitch camp every night if the being is keeping it moving versus trying to remain in one area and do that same thing. It's just way easier to accomplish that while keeping it moving. And the panhandling, which becomes necessary. Meanwhile, economically, I think, by and large, that's going to be a thing of the past, and which is fair. I mean, it's just something that comes along with that lifestyle anyway. And at what point, if the general public is ever actually able to fully face what, is going on at the level of what their lives are going to be like, at some point, somebody would be able to see, oh, here's a trustworthy person who just mostly wants to spend his time by himself. And yeah, he's strange and odd, and we're never going to be able to explain him to our family and our friends and our coworkers. But if we need somebody to stay on a piece of property and do some things, and we need somebody trustworthy, here's somebody who's able to do all of that responsibly for again, subsistence level, meaning he will survive on a minimum level of resources. And I think you're going to see more and more situations where individuals end up living, on the property of some business. Yep, slow roll me. Slow roll me. Slow roll the big rig. Yeah, slow rolling. That's what you want to do. Good job. See that dotted line in that merge area? That's where you're supposed to accelerate and get in front of me, not continue to slow down into my right of way. But that's okay. I'll slow down. And now I'll crawl up this hill while they go 80. Now they're going 80 anyway. Like, yeah, you could have just went 80 right in front of me and let me keep my momentum. But, oh well. Such is life, so-called life. Mikey likes it. Might as well like it, Mikey. And so to be irritated or annoyed, even momentarily, slightly momentarily, that's normal. See, because the gaslighting is we're all in this together. It's a proper society, blah, blah, blah. Except if that was my speed, and there would be no actual reason to be annoyed. See? But that can't happen. And I accept that it can't happen. But you can't have a populace comprised of people who can't even observe themselves going 65 miles an hour around a tight corner up an on ramp, and then to recognize that the next thing you know, they've slowed down to 45 by the time they hit the actual merge area, when they're supposed to go 45 around the tight curve, and they're supposed to accelerate from 45 to 65 in the merge area. They're doing the opposite. So you can't have a populace who thinks that's correct, and then, oh, there's going to be a correct, proper, we're all in this together society. That's not possible. That cannot happen. Oh, and some of this is my caffeine addiction is intensifying, certainly. Some of this is. We're now behind on the caffeine since that's accelerated in the last week or so. And so this is all an example of Benton is already doing better. If I'm already doing better and conducting myself appropriately, the gaslighting of the realm is proven, because if I bring this up to the realm says, well, hey, Benton, do better. Well, hey, suck it up, Buttercup. Well, what's the big deal? Because the realm recognizes, well, the realm can't ask the bozo masses to do better. That's not an option. And remember, and so here's where it ties into the millennial steam stuff, where, probably, as I'm just assuming, something of a defense to, being his coworkers in some way expecting him to have some tale of how wonderful his vacation is, or was rather. And so, his defense to them, being toxically positive, is to point out the precariousness of their own situation. I guess he knows some woman who's maybe going to get laid off soon, and he's talking about how she's, and I don't know if it's his coworker or not, and she already makes, it's effectively, let's just, it's minimum wage, right? $16 an hour or whatever. It's effectively minimum wage. I don't know what it is in Arizona, but either way, it's either literally or effectively minimum wage. And he's talking about how, I guess she's a single mother with 2 children. And so he's pointing out to her, like, hey, when and if you lose this job, I hope you realize how screwed you are, because, there's just no possibility. And I don't know if she has a husband, or I'm not exactly sure. Oh, I think here's what it is. I think she's Gen Z maybe, and she's got an older millennial parent or parents, and maybe one parent. And a lot of these working older millennials understand that they've already been laid off recently, or they're about to be laid off in the near future. And how are their adult children, who a lot of them do have jobs, these Gen Zers, but it's just not economically possible for them to go live on their own. Now, if they weren't, my generation, well, we went and got roommates, and it was a little more doable economically, but it wasn't even, I couldn't necessarily just go rent my own place. And then with people's mental health being what it is these days, is it even feasible to even have roommates in the first place? Like, that may not even be possible. But so her answer to all of this, and this is how people are. Her answer to him, just explaining to her what her situation is eventually just to go, well, that's, you're number one, you're being negative, right? Millennials team. Well, the answer to that is, well, okay, if I had never been born, everything I'm saying would still be true. So what's the difference? Clearly, my attitude can't be the problem. So let's just remove me from the equation. Does that change anything? If everybody's positive about the situation, does that change the actual situation? And this brings me back to Obama when he became president during the global financial crisis. And remember, all people like Clinton and Obama give a fuck about is putting on their Sunday best, looking good in their tailored suit and giving a speech. That's literally all they care about. All they care about. And so he's becoming annoyed and frustrated because he's constantly asked all this stuff about the economy. And at a certain point, Obama starts to tell people to their face that their attitude is the problem, as if their attitude can somehow affect economics itself, which is facts and figures and transactions. See, again, well, we'll just gaslight the individual. No, well, it's your fault, individual. Oh, okay. Well, let me change my attitude and let's see, does the realm change? Well, no, it doesn't. Turns out it doesn't. Now, my own experience can change, but and then, it's this whole idea of she finally, her only really answer is, well, I'll figure it out. And this idea of, you're seeing this on TikTok a lot. I don't go to TikTok, but enough of this is filtered down from TikTok. And my brain has once I see a couple of videos like this, I understand what's going on. And you have these women life coaches, and a lot of it is they just straight up say, I don't focus on anything that doesn't serve me. So it's the law of attraction, meaning they refuse to affirm anything other than they are receiving abundance, they are loved, they are supported. And anything they view that doesn't align with that simply doesn't exist. And so when if anybody that's heard me say for years now, ignoring reality is not positivity, that's those women or men, but typically women, choosing to use, vision boards and fake it till you make it and the so-called law of attraction, which is a thing. It's just not a thing in that way. It's them trying to use all of that. Hang on, I got to pay attention here and make sure I'm taking the correct exits. It's a little tricky through here. And, or I'll end up taking the wrong route. And so these life coaches, who, let's face it, are most likely on OnlyFans and have sugar daddies. I mean, let's just call it what it is. Sex workers, effectively. So now it's now here's your life coach who's also a sex worker. And again, whatever. I don't have a dog in that hunt, but I have my own opinions, of course. Well, it's bad for them. Who suffers the most? Well, the sex worker. Yeah, obviously. And so her thing is, well, I only focus on certain things that are positive, and I have a vision board, and she actually believes that her life is going to unfold, based on not the actual law of attraction, but the book, The Secret, right? It's like, well, yeah, if you're willing to find some old disgusting man with money and find three or four of them on, seekingarrangements.com, then absolutely your vision board is going to work out for you. Sure. And, and I don't think OnlyFans is really even an option. I think most of that money's probably dried up. There was a time when it seemed like just about almost anybody of reasonable attractiveness could make money on there. That seems already have dried up. I've never been on the site, and believe me, I would tell you if I had, but just from what I hear, that's pretty much over with. Of course, certain people who are willing to, you know, further defile their already defiled flesh, right, will make more money or continue to make money. That's a keeping up with the Joneses on some level, is it not? All right, I need to start to look for a place to take a tinkle. Or we're going to be faced with trying to get the rest of the way there. Let me check the batteries here. Yeah. And I think the challenge for Millennials team is to accept all of this, that this is how these people are, Millennials team, and they're not changing. And in fact, these are the NPC normies who make everything worse for people like me and Millennials team, and perhaps the listeners of this channel. Because, again, the answer, if we bring it up, is to gaslight us. And now I have to be the problem. But, well, I can't. How can I be the problem? I'm not the problem. The problem isn't that people are now becoming aware that, oh, well, did you know America actually ranks, like, is not anywhere near the top when we rank countries by freedom or whatever? It's like, yeah, I've been knowing that for a long ass time because I pay attention to stuff. But yeah, absolutely. They're just all astonished and shocked. It's like, yeah, the problem is that people are shocked by that. The problem is that people don't already know that. It proves that they're just believing whatever they're told, just like the so-called Christians. They're just believing whatever they've been told. Okay, well, what's the purpose of discernment and wisdom and all of this? What's the purpose of John 14:26? The Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, will teach you all things. Well, it's taught me that to just accept, what the realm tells me and say, well, that's now a religion and there's a dogma and a doctrine. Right? Well, why didn't Christ, who was apparently also a prophet, why didn't Jesus say, hey, there's going to be a Saul of Tarsus, and make sure to listen to him? He's coming along in a couple of generations or whatever. See, that did not occur. Anyway, it's a time for some grapes, so bear with me while I eat on the stream. Speaking of healing and restoration, I think my broken tooth is mostly healed to the point where I can more or less eat normally without continuing to break it. As long as I'm not eating something way too, crazy hard. Man, the grapes with the seeds are so much better than the. I think I'm just going to quit eating the seedless. Say that, but we'll see if I stick to it. I'm almost out of apricots. Somehow I usually stay stocked up, but some parts of the country, Walmart just doesn't sell canned apricot for whatever reason. In fact, in LA, I had to get them off of Amazon because nobody sells them. They just don't have them. Actually, Walmart does, but it's much of a pain in the ass to try to get to Walmart from where I was at in LA. Well, it's a difference. Burbank, anyway. Not in LA, not even the city of LA. Ouch. I might have spoke too soon on that. The healing of the tooth. That was pretty rough. Not too bad though. Yeah. Road's looking a little slick or slow by roll here. Woo! We dodged a bullet there. Here comes a oversized somebody hauling what looks like a big shed, um, or a small barn, I guess, with the pilot cars and all that. Better speed up, pass, because sometimes those things go a little faster than you think they might go. Usually, pretty good drivers hauling that stuff. Make sure they don't catch up to me. Pardon me. There you go. Yep. I think we're like 10 minutes out. I don't know if they're open or not. I got to find a place to get out of the way long enough to use the restroom. That's mission number one. So I guess I'll let y'all go. Thanks for watching. Bye.